Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh, coming up in the next 30 minutes. Chandrababu Naidu becomes Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister for fourth term. Prime Minister Modi attends the swearing-in ceremony. Mohan Manji to take oath as Odisha Chief Minister shortly. Newly appointed Union Ministers of India take charge of their respective offices. Nirmala Sitharaman returns as the Finance Minister. And Hamas seeks a complete stop to fighting in Gaza in response to a UN-backed three-state ceasefire proposal. Israel says this amounts to rejection of the key elements of peace plan. The first session of 18th Lok Sabha, or the lower house of Parliament, will commence on June 24th and conclude on July 3rd. India's Parliamentary Affairs Minister Kiran Rijiju announced on Wednesday the session will begin on June 24th for oath or affirmation of the newly elected members and will conclude on July 3rd. President Draupadi Murmu will address a joint sitting of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha on June 27th. And is likely to outline the new government's roadmap for the next 5 years. Prime Minister Modi is expected to introduce his Council of Ministers to Parliament after the President's address on June 27th.
देश के जनता ने जो निर्देश दिया है उस निर्देश का पालन करना है। हम सब पॉलिटिकल पार्टी मिलकर के दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा लोकतंत्र भारत का संसद इसको अच्छा से चलाएं। प्रधानमंत्री जी का दूरदृष्टि विजन है, उसके हिसाब से हम अच्छा संसद का सत्र चलाएंगे, ऐसा हम उम्मीद रखते हैं।
Senior BJP leader Nirmala Sitharaman on Wednesday took charge as the Union Minister for Finance and Corporate Affairs. Sitharaman retains the post for the second consecutive term. She is the first woman to serve as the minister in 3 consecutive terms of the Modi government. Nirmala Sitharaman was greeted at office in North Block by Finance Secretary T.V. Somanathan and other secretaries of the Ministry of Finance and Corporate Affairs. She expressed her sincere gratitude to Prime Minister Modi for giving her the opportunity to work as the Union Finance and Corporate Affairs Minister again and serve India and its people under his guidance. Union Minister Nitin Gadkari resumed office as the Minister of Road Transport, Highways alongside Ministers of State Ajay Tamta and Harsh Malhotra. Minister Gadkari said India will be equipped with world-class modern infrastructure at an accelerated pace under Prime Minister Modi's leadership. Jyotiraditya Scindia assumed charge as Union Minister in the Ministry of Development of Northeastern Region. Dr. Majumdar, Minister of State in the Ministry of Doner, along with senior officers of the ministry, welcomed the Union Minister. After assuming charge, Minister Scindia met senior officials of the ministry and reviewed the schemes.
आज मुझे प्रधानमंत्री जी के आशीर्वाद से एक मौका मिला है सेवा करने के लिए और उस सेवा भाव के साथ सुकांता जी और हम दोनों तत्पर होकर उत्तर पूर्वी राज्यों की सेवा करें।
Meanwhile, the head of Telugu Desam Party TDP N. Chandrababu Naidu was sworn in as the new Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh after his party emerged victorious in the latest assembly elections held recently. The state geared up for the elaborate swearing-in ceremony of Chandrababu Naidu as the Chief Minister, which was also attended by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. During the ceremony, actor turned politician Pawan Kalyan, also the president of Janasena Party, took oath as the state's deputy chief minister. Also, 20 ministers, including state politicians Nara Lokesh and Kenjarapu Naidu also took oath as member of State Cabinet. Mohan Charan Manjhi will take oath as the Chief Minister of the Eastern Indian state of Odisha in a short while from now. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will also be attending the swearing-in ceremony of the new state government. The four-time member of Legislative Assembly, this prominent tribal leader, Manjhi was a teacher in his locality before entering into politics. He previously served as a government deputy chief whip, opposition chief whip and chairperson of Public Accounts Committee. Odisha Chief Minister designate Mohan Charan Manjhi paid tributes to freedom fighters in the state capital, Bhubaneswar, today. He visited many places, interacted with people of various denominations, assured them of solutions to their problems. Deputy CM Kanakvardhan Singh Deo and Deputy CM Prabhati Parida also paid tributes to statue of freedom fighters. Later, Mohan Manjhi met with outgoing Chief Minister Naveen Patnaik at his residence. Moving on, in a tragic incident, at least 41 people have been killed in a fire that broke out in a building housing workers in Kuwait's Mangaf city. According to reports, majority of those killed are believed to be Indians. An investigation has been launched to ascertain the cause of the fire. Meanwhile, Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has expressed condolence to the families of the deceased. He added that Indian Embassy will be providing assistance in relation to this incident. Meanwhile, India's ambassador to Kuwait, Adar Swaikar, visited the hospital where over 30 injured Indian workers have been admitted. And Kuwait's Deputy Prime Minister Sheikh Fahad Yusuf Al Sabah has accused the real estate developers of violating building laws, leading to the safety hazard.
Unfortunately, the greed of the property owners is what leads to these matters. I will call the Director of Municipalities and we will talk to all property owners. Any property violation will be removed.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will travel to Italy on 13th June to participate in the G7 summit. This will be PM Modi's first overseas visit after being elected for the third consecutive term.
At the invitation of Honorable Prime Minister of Italy, Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji will be travelling to Apulia, Italy tomorrow to participate in the 50th G7 summit, which is to be held there on 14th of June, that's day after tomorrow, where India has been invited as an outreach country. The visit assumes a significance as this will be Honorable Prime Minister's first overseas travel after resuming office in his third consecutive term. It will also afford him an opportunity to engage with other world leaders present at the G7 summit on issues of importance to India as also to the global south. Prime Minister will participate in the outreach session along with the other countries invited for the outreach summit. At this session, the focus would be on artificial intelligence, energy, Africa and the Mediterranean.
And briefing media in New Delhi on Wednesday, India's Foreign Secretary Vinay Mohan Kwatra said the issue of cross-border terrorism will be raised at the highest levels at the G7 meet.
So far as the issue of terrorism is concerned and the nature of cross-border terrorism that India faces, I'm sure that in terms of the challenges that such instances pose to the general peace and stability in the region, they would suitably figure in Prime Minister's bilateral conversation as and when it is necessary, depending upon the agenda of bilateral discussions.
On to some other stories. A US-endorsed proposal to reach a ceasefire in Gaza hangs in limbo as both Israel and Hamas trade blame. Israel has accused Hamas of rejecting the plan's key parts, including a proposal to release the hostages, while Hamas says that its response to the plan has opened up a wide pathway for an agreement. US President Joe Biden's three-phase plan aims for a ceasefire and phased release of Israeli hostages in Gaza in exchange for Palestinian prisoners in Israel, while a permanent end to hostilities is negotiated through mediators. Hezbollah has fired dozens of rockets at an Israeli military post after the group's top commander Abu Talib was killed in an Israeli strike on Lebanon. He is the senior-most Hezbollah commander killed in the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict. However, Israeli army is yet to issue an official statement on the strike. According to a report, 3 other Hezbollah members were also killed in the strike. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has left Jordan for Qatar as he continues his West Asia tour. The trip comes after the top US diplomat called Hamas's support for a UN resolution on Gaza ceasefire proposal a hopeful sign. Qatar, along with Egypt, have been the main mediators in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Earlier this week, Blinken met Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in Cairo and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. DD India's Sarah Coates has sent us this report from Tel Aviv.
Well, certainly this was one of Blinken's goals, to get this ceasefire in place, to potentially see this escalation in northern Israel come to an end. It is extremely concerning and has really only been ratcheting up over the past few days. Just this morning, there were 2 separate barrages of rockets of almost 100 each time launched from southern Lebanon by Hezbollah into Israeli territory. And these are communities that are still largely evacuated. There are more than 60,000 internally displaced people here in Israel. They are unable to go home due to the dire situation in the north. And there is a lot of concern that if this gets any worse, that a full-scale regional war, which could involve Iran, could be on the cards. Now, this latest barrage, or 2 barrages of rockets that were sent over, that was in response allegedly to a number of Israeli strikes in southern Lebanon overnight, which killed a number of senior Hezbollah commanders, one of those being a very senior commander who the Israelis say was behind the majority of rocket fire since the 8th of October. So this is certainly, as I said, an extremely concerning situation, and one that the Americans really want to bring under control as soon as possible.
The US military forces destroyed 2 anti-ship cruise missile launchers in a Houthi-controlled area of Yemen. The action has stoked fears that Israel-Hamas conflict could spread and destabilize the wider Middle East. US Central Command said the missile launchers presented an imminent threat to US and coalition forces and to merchant vessels transiting the region. Meanwhile, British security firm Ambre said on Wednesday a merchant vessel has reported being struck approximately 67.7 nautical miles southwest of Yemen's Hodeidah. US President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, has been convicted by a jury on Tuesday of lying about his illegal drug use to buy a gun, making him the first child of a sitting US president to be convicted of a crime. Biden faces up to 25 years in jail, but is unlikely to receive the maximum sentence, as Caroline Malone reports.
In a statement shortly after the verdict, he said he was disappointed with the outcome, but that the love and support of his family was even more important and warming to him. We heard much the same from the US president himself. Joe Biden saying that, people have to remember he is not just the president, he's also a father, and the love of his family is more important to him. However, we also heard live from President Biden during a gun violence prevention event later on Tuesday afternoon. He addressed the need to ban assault weapons. He spoke to a crowd in a tone that was very much campaigning, which is ahead, of course, of the US presidential election later this year. He did not mention his son's verdict, that his son had been found guilty on these 3 charges. However, President Biden did change his schedule. He is headed straight for Wilmington, Delaware. He is expected to be there until Wednesday afternoon, when he's due to fly out to Europe to be present for the G7 leaders meeting. Now, during this trial itself, we heard a lot of testimony from witnesses talking about Hunter Biden's substance abuse problems, how he used and abused drugs over many years. The ultimate question was he using drugs or knew that he had been using drugs when he entered the form to say that he wasn't a drug user to buy the gun? Clearly, they found him guilty of that. But the special prosecutor, David Weiss, came out afterwards and said, it isn't just about this as a person who has an addiction. This is about his criminal act. This is about the lying that is the crucial part of why he was found guilty. We also heard from another interesting voice. That was from one of the jury members, known as jury number 10. Wasn't given his name to US media, but he spoke out earlier on Tuesday and said that there was sadness on his part for the Biden family. He thought it was especially sad that Naomi Biden, who's the daughter of Hunter Biden, was took to the stand and gave evidence about her own father and his substance abuse problems. He said it didn't help their case, it didn't hurt their case, but he didn't see it as being necessary. But clearly, in the last couple of weeks, a lot of the challenges and problems and sadness of the Biden family has been aired to the public. And here we are now with this guilty verdict for Hunter Biden. We await a sentencing date. It could happen in the next few months, anything up to 120 days. During that time, July 8th, we're likely to get Donald Trump sentencing as well. He, of course, was found guilty on 34 business falsifying claims. So we could be in a scenario when potentially both Donald Trump and the son of the president, Hunter Biden, get jail time, really, before we get to the presidential election this year. At least with Hunter Biden, though, the special prosecutor has come out to say they're not going to be going for the maximum sentence because he's a first-time offender. Hunter Biden, though, does also have another trial coming up in September where he's facing tax evasions. All of this happening, of course, just a few months before November's presidential election. Caroline Malone in Washington for DD India.
And US President Joe Biden showcased his administration's efforts to cut down on illegal gun trafficking just hours after his son, Hunter, was convicted of lying about his drug use to illegally buy a gun. Democrats largely favor stricter gun laws to reduce deaths from gun violence across the country.
In 2 weeks, we'll mark the 2nd anniversary of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. It's the most significant gun legislation in nearly 30 years. It was designed to reduce gun violence and save lives, and I'm so proud of the tremendous progress we made since then.
Shifting focus to Europe, Russia launched a missile and drone attack on Kiev early on Wednesday, damaging residences and injuring several people in the Ukrainian capital. Ukrainian military said it shot down 5 out of 6 missiles and all 24 drones launched during Russia's overnight attack, and claimed that Russians used a combination of cruise and ballistic missiles as well as drones in its attack. The attack also resulted in power outages in the capital. Air raid alerts lasted several hours across all of Ukraine, including in the regions bordering NATO member Poland. Operational command of the Polish Armed Forces said Polish and allied aircraft have been activated as a precaution. As Russia commenced its second stage of drills practicing deployment of tactical nuclear weapons, its defense ministry said Moscow's non-strategic nuclear exercises involve Iskander missiles. The drills are being conducted alongside Belarusian troops after what Moscow called threats from Western powers. The exercise includes obtaining special training, ammunition for the M operational tactical missile system, equipping launch vehicles with them, and covertly advancing to the designated position area for preparations for missile launches. The French president will hold a news conference on Wednesday as he tries to kickstart his party's Renaissance election campaign. Emmanuel Macron says he will not quit as leader if the far-right opposition win the election, which he surprisingly called on Sunday. DD India correspondent Ross Cullen gets us more.
Emmanuel Macron, the French president, has promised to make 2 or 3 speeches or statements every week of the campaign as he tries to regain the initiative. In 2022, in the last election, his party lost more than 100 lawmakers, but he believes there is still a path open to regain a majority in Parliament. He is coming under increasing pressure from the far right, though, from the National Rally, who are led by 28-year-old Jordan Bardella. They are always quick to mobilise, they have a good campaigning infrastructure in place, and, crucially for the far right, they have momentum after their crushing victory over Emmanuel Macron's party Renaissance in the EU vote on the 9th of June. We will find out a little bit later on Wednesday exactly what Emmanuel Macron's campaign strategy is when he lays out he and his party's ambitions for these elections. Ross Cullen in France reporting for DD India.
UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Labour leader Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the second televised debate on Wednesday. It comes after the governing Conservatives released their election manifesto ahead of July 4th poll. DD India's Ollie Barrett gets us more from London.
Well, the war of words between the governing Conservative Party and opposition Labour, particularly about the economy and taxation, is increasingly robust. The Labour Party are accusing the Conservatives of gaslighting the country when it comes to the economy and their pledges over taxation. In the Conservative Party's manifesto launch on Tuesday, they did pledge billions of dollars in tax cuts. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak insisting that the government can allow people to keep more of their own money in their pockets rather than giving it to the government to spend. The Labour Party insist that they are unfunded, uncosted tax cuts and that the Conservatives have not set out the full detail about how exactly they would raise the money to pay for them. In turn, the Conservatives accuse the Labour Party of having a series of spending pledges that would require a series of tax rises. That is a principle that the Labour Party denies. Now, later we have the second televised head-to-head debate between Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, and Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, with polling continuing to suggest that the Conservatives trail by a wide margin Keir Starmer's Labour Party. It may well be a similar situation to what we saw the first time round, with Keir Starmer trying to play it safe and not make a major slip-up, and Rishi Sunak perhaps minded to go on the attack because he needs something in the polling to change between now and July the 4th, and change by a significant amount. Also on Wednesday, the Green Party released their election manifesto. Ollie Barrett in London reporting for DD India.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will travel to Italy on Thursday to attend the Group of 7 Summit or G7 Summit. In his first overseas visit after assuming office for the third term, Prime Minister Modi would join global leaders in attending the G7 Summit, which is being held in Italy's Borgo Egnazia from June 13th to 15th. DD India correspondent Amritpal Singh reports from Apulia in Italy.
Days after assuming office, Prime Minister Modi will make a day-long visit to Italy to participate in the G7 summit on June 14th. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni had extended an invitation to Prime Minister Modi to attend the G7 summit under her presidency of the global bloc.
There has been a very regular exchange of visits between the two countries in the last 2-3 years. As you know, Prime Minister Meloni herself had visited India twice last year. So the high-level political dialogue in itself is a big boost to the bilateral cooperation. It sends a signal that India and Italy take each other seriously, that they want to engage with each other in all domains.
As world leaders gather here in the picturesque settings by the Adriatic Sea, Prime Minister Modi will be holding bilateral meetings with G7 leaders, including with US President Joe Biden and UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, as also with his Italian counterpart Giorgia Meloni. The Prime Minister on Friday will address an outreach session where he'll address issues related to food security, health and development. Prime Minister Modi will also hold bilateral meetings with his counterparts from other G7 partner countries. The Prime Minister is expected to address issues of the global south, development and climate change.
Here the Prime Minister will have an excellent opportunity to voice not only India's policies and approach to some of the global economic issues, but he will also look at it as continuing some of the follow-up from the G20 presidency that he had last year. And we also have expectations from the global south that we will continue to push their agenda in the global platforms and speak on their behalf.
The G7 summit is a grouping of the world's 7 most developed economies that include Canada, France, Germany, Japan, the United Kingdom and the United States of America as its member nations. As the Italy summit is largely focused on the ongoing conflicts in West Asia and Ukraine, the G7 is likely to adopt its plan of funding the Ukrainian war chest through frozen Russian assets. India, on its part, would like to stay away from any such move that directly incriminates Russia, thus reiterating its long-standing position that the way forward is through dialogue and diplomacy and not through war. With cameraman Shailendra Chauhan, this is Amrit Pal Singh in Borgo Enazia, Italy.
Texas is known as the Big Sky Country, an expansive, largely unobstructed twinkling oasis. But as cities expand and more skyscrapers pop up, those skies are getting crowded and light pollution is having an unintended consequences. Birds are colliding with buildings at an alarming rate, especially during migration season. Texas sky is an avian superhighway funneling billions of birds south in the winter and then north again in the summers. As Tony Waterman explains from Austin, a simple flip of the switch could help keep them alive, help fight climate change.
Actually, look on this third-story window. It's probably a spot where a bird's collided. So you can see kind of this lighter spot, like almost like a water balloon just hit the window.
3 times a week, ecology PhD candidate Brian Stokes and other bird enthusiasts are out searching for birds. Not living ones, but ones that have died in the middle of the night, victims of mid-air building collisions.
We want to sort of check everywhere because they can get stunned and sort of fly another few feet.
No birds were found on this morning, but experts believe as many as 1 billion die from building collisions every year in the U.S., disoriented by bright city lights while migrating at night.
Upwards of 80% of the United States can't even see the Milky Way anymore. That's how bright the sky has gotten. And if they're seeing light, it messes up, their sense of direction. It messes up their understanding of what they're seeing in front of them.
Glass buildings are particularly lethal. Last October, more than 1,000 birds died in a single night after colliding with McCormick Place in Chicago.
We're seeing major global declines in bird populations, and there are several large factors that are at play. One, which is climate change, and another one, which is habitat destruction. And those really go hand in hand.
Rapid urbanization and habitat loss has caused bird populations in North America to decline by 3 billion since 1970, diminishing an important part of the ecosystem.
Besides being great pest controllers, birds play an important role in fighting the effects of climate change. They disperse seeds, spreading plants into new areas. They provide nutrients to marshes that serve as a buffer from storm damage. Some even help pollinate plants and reduce the spread of disease.
To help reduce the mortality rates, some U.S. cities, including Austin, have joined the Lights Out campaign, an initiative encouraging building owners and residents to shut off their lights between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., prime migration time for birds. Research has shown a simple flip of the switch can reduce collisions by up to 60%.
What's good for birds is good for people. You can have a beautiful building, you can have wonderful lights, but those lights could also be turned down.
Turned down so fewer dead birds turn up in the morning. Tony Waterman in Austin, Texas, reporting for DD India.
Pantanal region in Brazil, the world's largest tropical wetland, is experiencing an unprecedented number of fires, largely attributed to climate change. Reduced rainfall, low river levels have rendered the region more susceptible to fires. Authorities say the numbers of fires in the Pantanal so far this year has increased compared to last year.